Just because winter is over doesn't mean we get a break from the rain. And I certainly don't get a break from all the questions you send me, so I'm going to take the chance to answer one of the most frequent. Does a dirt jump bike make for a good street trials bike? I mean, my bike kinda looks like one, right? But there are some key differences. Street trials bikes have a cute little rigid fork. This saves weight and makes them more preciser. This, combined with a very steep head angle, gives good front wheel ability. Because the fork is shorter than a suspension fork, street trials bikes have more spacers, a taller, longer stem and high bars to make up the difference. They also have short chainstays for greater control on the rear wheel, although dirt jump bikes can sometimes have equally short chainstays too. Although one area they differ is the bottom bracket height, with street trials bikes being much higher for better ground clearance and even more control on the rear wheel. Another major difference is the gear ratio, which is much lighter on a street trials bike. This sacrifices top speed for snappy acceleration. All of these things combined make for a great street trials bike. But what if you already have a dirt jump bike? Can it be converted to be as good? To find out, I sent the cute thief on a mission to collect parts for a new build. He's done well. This is a Dartmoor 2.6 player, and I think this would be an excellent choice for this experiment. Jump bikes can often feel a little short, but some brands offer their frames in different lengths. This is a long version, which is perfect. It also has a tapered head tube, which gives me more choice of forks to use. Now some frames have complex sliding dropouts and disc mounts, which can feel a little flexy. This frame has nice simple yet stiff ones. The chainstays are slightly longer than my street trials bike, but not by much. It will be interesting to see how this affects the ride. Here's a good visual for the differences between the two. Look how low the bottom bracket would be if the dirt jump bike had a short, rigid fork. And check out how high and slack the front end would be if the BB heights were the same. I'll never get the two to ride identically, but I'm curious to know how capable the DJ bike will be. Before I get building, I'm finding this frame colour a little bit boring. I haven't painted a frame for a while, but I fancy making this one a little bit more interesting. Starch and Sintrip is my paint stripper name. And there's a message about safety in here somewhere. Strippers can be dangerous. This stuff is great though. This isn't sped up. After a bit of elbow grease with wire wool, I have a perfectly raw frame. And this is a used frame, so there's a perfect chance to inspect for cracks. Fortunately, this one's in great shape. The frame looks strong, but one potential weak spot could be this disc mount. Trials is especially hard on frames, so we'll see if this can cope with some abuse. Now I was tempted to leave it raw, as I think it looks pretty cool, but I have a paint idea I really want to try. I use a rough Scotch pad, not to be confused with a flat in Glasgow, to clean and add texture. This will help give the paint something to stick to. Then I make a temporary spray booth and hang the frame from a fine wire. This should, hopefully, stop me from painting all my other bikes at the same time. To keep the threads clean, I fit a sacrificial bottom bracket. And then I wipe off any fingerprints with some booze. And then, to get it completely dry and dust free, I blast from the compressor. I then attach some primer. And let it dry. Once dry, I fill one of the cute thief's toilet cleaners with water and use a fine Scotch pad to give the next coat of primer something to key onto. Then a wipe down and another compressor blast. Then I add another layer of primer. I repeat this process a couple more times. Once all the layers of primer are finished, I can start on the paint. And I've gone with a purple as my base colour. Looking good. Once dry, I use a very fine wet and dry sandpaper and water before the next coat, just like I did with the primer. The sandpaper is gentle, so it doesn't remove much, but you can see how it's now duller than it was. I also find the Scotch pad gets into the awkward spaces better, so I use a combination of them both. Another blast gets rid of any water or dust, and now it's ready for the second coat. The more prep and patience you have, the better the outcome. I repeat this process until I've added 4 layers and then roughen it up once more for the next step. And that's to add a splash of colour. I picked up a light blue and a chrome. And when I say a splash of colour, I really mean it. I've seen this done by hundreds of people before, and I've wanted to try it myself for years. Jackson Pollock's got nothing on me. Stoke levels to the moon with the result. I added chrome to a test piece, but it's getting a little too 80s for my liking. Less is more, so I'll stick with just the blue. Once dry, I'll roughen it up once more for the lacquer. Now that's the same process as the primer and colour, so I'll just skip over that. I don't know about you though, but I flippin' love this. Now that I've got a snazzy paint job, I don't want to clamp it in the stand, so I add the seat clamp and post now to clamp instead. Mr. Cute Thief got me a cool looking pro post. It's quite unusual, but fairly light. Only issue is some paint got in the seat tube. In hindsight, I should have popped some cardboard down there before painting. I use a tiny bit of stripper on a cloth to loosen it up, and then a Scotch pad to remove it. And there we have it. It looks darker here than in person, but I'm over the moon with the result. This is the best finish I've ever had on a home paint job, and I'm glad I took my time. This took me 3 days in total. The paint will still be soft for a few days yet, so I'll have to be extra careful with the build. To help make the brakes easier to set up, I'll remove some paint from the tabs with a blade. Okay, we're already a video length in, but a box of parts has arrived, so let's get this thing built lickety-split. The headset is one of these newfangled internal things. This pleases me as it's lighter, but also avoids me potentially damaging the paint by whacking in cups. Not this time headset 2x2 press. The stem is the same as I have on a fat bike. A fairly budget XLC model, but it's light and strong and one of the only 55mm stems the Cute Thief could find. I wanted something ever so slightly longer than usual to help give me more room for Trials power moves. The only thing I don't like about it is the cheap bolts that are a loose fit with my Allen keys. I think I'll replace these. Because this is a dirt jump bike, I'm fitting some awesome RockShox Pike DJ forks. Not much to say that hasn't been said about these, but I did change the axle to a lighter bolt-up version just to save a few grams. I'll be running the front brake through the steerer, and this headlock will let me do that, but there's no point fitting it just yet. So let's move on and fit my favourite bars, the Inspired Arcades. Strong, nice and tall, a perfect shape, and they sound great with the traditional bike build announcement. Christmas #1, here I come. It was nice of the Cute Thief to get me this baggie. There's got to be a few ounces in here. Let's use a few grams of titanium to save a few more grams of steel. And that includes the steerer bolts too. The arse bearing is now special, a SRAM GXP model that's definitely not one of those self-fitting ones. It will match up nicely with these SRAM Descendant cranks. If you've watched my previous builds, you know I like this style of crank due to their tough steel axle. Now I'm training the Cute Thief to also be able to build bikes, and he's learning quick. He's already fitted an inspired chainring and guard cooker combo. 22 tooth is what most Street Trials bikes run up front, as this gives good ground clearance. Now onto the front round. It's exactly the same wheel as I have on my Street Trials bike, minus the crazy rope spokes. An ever reliable light bicycle Recon 26-inch carbon rim with 38mm outer width for more tyre stability at lower pressures. And that's with an Industry 9 Hydra hub, sapling spokes and alloy nipples. A light, stiff but strong wheel. Maxes have impressed me on my other bikes, so I'm pleased to find them in the box for this build. This is an Ardent model and it's a decent all-round front option which should cope well on the streets and non-streets. It's tubeless ready and a decent weight, so let's get it fitted. As we all know, wheels need feeding to get them good and strong, which is why we feed them 100% unpasteurized wheel milk. Although be careful with new untamed wheels, they can attack. I still get blown away with how light these wheels are for how strong they are. What a time to be alive. Brake geeks, or just fans of mine, will know what models these rotors belong to. I'm going to go with 180mm for reasons. Every time a titanium bolt is fitted, a Cute Thief gets his forever home. Now that's a lot of homes once these rotor bolts are fitted. To avoid them rattling loose, the bolts, not the Cute Thieves, I add some blue Loctite. Same deal with the rear wheel, light bicycle carbon rim and Hydra hub that makes a din. Sorry, got all poetic there, but for serial, this is just about the best rear wheel you can get for a Street Trials bike. I've no excuses not to ride this bike well. A Maxxis Aggressor will be my connection to the earth at the back. I've not used one of these before, but it looks pretty neat. Gonna see what this tyre is like before I go tubeless, so that was the easiest tyre fitting ever. Let's add 18 spikes to this bit. 2218 is the norm for a 26-inch Street Trials bike, so that's what I'm going for here. Any lighter and you get too much crank rotation when doing static moves, and any harder makes it difficult to instantly accelerate for those same moves. This is the sweet spot, for me at least. May as well fit the rear rotor, which again is 180mm to match the front. Check out that thumb technique, by the way. And here's a top tip. Twisting the rotor before tightening the bolts will center it and stop any issues with it having high and low spots. You're welcome. Now here's a pickle jar full of incompatibility. How do I get my 12mm through-axled hub to fit a 10mm horizontal frame? If only there was an adapter available. Bang! And the problem's gone. This is indeed a 12mm to 10mm hub converter made by Reverse Components, and just what I needed. Although I did need to modify it by lengthening the 10mm diameter so I could run a chain tug. And speaking of chain tugs, I had to modify one to fit this frame by enlarging the hole to 12mm and grinding it a little thinner. Because I don't need to slide this over the 12mm axle, I can use a neat inspired arcade tug on the other side. And it doesn't get any neater than that. A KMC K610 chain, one of my favourite ever chains, will act as today's chain. Unfortunately, this gear ratio dictates my rear wheel sits a little further back than I'd have liked. To remove a chain link would mean I'd have to grind the drop out so I could move my wheel further forwards, but then there isn't enough tyre clearance. I tried, so this is the only position my rear wheel could be. The tugs work well though. First I set the chain tension and then I centre the wheel with the other side. So yeah, if you know me, you don't get any prizes for guessing what brakes I have. Myself, the Cute Thief and Hayes have an agreement that they'll provide brakes as long as he doesn't steal their lunches too. If you're new to the channel, then let it be known that Hayes Dominion brakes are my favourite brakes of all time and you should give them a try. It's the light lever action that sold them on me, but they have great power, modulation and so far faultless reliability. But anyway, sales pitch over, let's fit them. Like I mentioned, I'm using this headlock to allow me to run the front brake through the steerer. The slots let the hose pass through and it clamps down like one big bolt. But first I need to take the hose off and pass it through the steerer. Once done, I can add the headlock. It's just a lot easier to fit the hose through the steerer when there's nothing in there. Fitting the front brake was nice and quick. The hose routing isn't ideal when it goes up the steerer, but I'll be running the fork super stiff so the hose won't get too baggy under compression. Next up, some Fiat pedals made of magnesium. Not the biggest or skinniest, but they were in the box of parts, so on they go. At least they're light. Instead of gloves for my hands, I use gloves for my bars. ODI long necks being my long-term favourites. The mushroom rib pattern is excellent at providing grip even when a little bit wet, lasts for ages. Now there's a slogan for you. Let's add a perch. It was only a couple of winters ago that I found out that Bergtech was a British brand. I always assumed they were American, but either way, I've never had one of their products before, so I'm pleased to change that by using this sweet saddle. There are lighter options, but this looks pretty awesome and is nicely padded. Bar spins maybe? Because of the seat post design, this is actually the lowest it will go, but I think it looks kind of cool raised a bit. I haven't weighed a bike for a while. Any guesses? 11.76 kilos, about the same as an off-the-shelf street trials bike. Not too bad. With everything tight, let's see how it rides. Now, as tempting as it is to give it some abuse, I'm actually holding back until the paint has had more time and I've got some frame protection added. But that said, first impressions are pretty good. So, what do you think, mister? I agree. I think this is possibly the best looking bike I've built yet. The paint really pops now it's out in the sun. But what do you think at home? I'd love to see your comments below. I can't wait to get out and shred on this thing and see what it's capable of and finally answer your question. But we'll save that for another video. Until then, hope you have an amazing week, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye everyone.